Welcome to Building Legendary Leaders, the podcast where leaders leave behind chaos and step into clarity. This is where real stories come alive with the struggles, breakthroughs, and lessons that shape the most effective executives today. Every episode delivers fresh insights you can apply to your own leadership journey. If you are ready to stop putting out fires and start leading with purpose, this is the place for you. Here is your host, Jim Saliba.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Building Legendary Leaders. Let's dive right in. Today's guest builds platforms that move business. He's led organizations through tough culture shifts, out of command and control and into transparency, has driven a leap from 6-month releases down to a 3-week cadence, while building trust with stakeholders all along the way. He's shaping the future as an SVP of EcoStruxure platform at Schneider Electric, and outside of work, you can find him watching anything sports or in his woodworking shop. Please join me in welcoming Chris Nelson.
Excellent, Jim. Well, first of all, thanks for the invite and the privilege to join your podcast, and really looking forward to our discussion. I enjoy all of our discussions.
I do too. And I'm really looking forward to today because today we're diving into why speed isn't just a metric or a number we hit. It's a leadership system. Here's how we're going to break down today's discussion. We'll start with lead with speed, how short, tight loops change behavior and outcomes across the organization. Then we'll tackle the mindset shift while moving from command and control to openness builds trust, ownership, and you know what? It's easier said than done. So we'll get into that. Next, we'll be building the connective tissue, the operating model, communications, and stakeholder governance that help keeps teams aligned. We'll explore transparency at a cadence, the smaller 3-week releases that drive quicker feedback, stronger customer relationships, and healthier business rhythms. And for those who stay to the end, Chris is going to share his playbook on champion Agile without losing efficiency. So we have a lot to cover, Chris. Tell me, you've led major transformations at scale, but let's rewind back a bit. Where did you first find yourself on this path? And what was an early moment that really set you on this journey?
It's a really great question to get this started. I think I could summarize it. It was in my very first work experiences in Merck & Company, where I really found it easy to make decisions. And when I looked around and saw other people, I saw them struggling with the ability to make decisions. I think my whole journey in leadership came from that realization, which is you have to make decisions quickly in order to be an effective leader.
You know, I have a friend, Paul, who I wrote a blog about a while back, and he was a company that buys water companies and new building areas, and they have to set a CEO of that area and build those leaders. And one of the times I asked him for what are the biggest problems he sees in building leaders, decision making was one of the top ones. And he said, you have to learn how to make decisions with only about probably 60% of the information. The rest has to come from experience and your gut and your intuition, but it doesn't end there. You have to follow it closely and be ready to make a call and say, oh, this isn't working. I'm bad. Let's make a change.
Yeah. I think another influence was my father. My father was a colonel in the military, and that really interest me. So I read a lot about military strategy, and I think that's a common strategy in the military, which is you can only make a decision based on the information you know, but make a decision, gather more information, reassess, and then either make a decision, pull back, or whatever. And I think it also closely aligns. I think, or Jeff Bezos is very famous for saying this. A lot of decisions are two-way doors, right? So you can make them, evaluate it, and you can always go back and revisit the decision and take the other path. So for many of the decisions, it's those two-way doors. You got to be a little bit more careful when it's the one-way door, when it's a major decision. And I remember Jeff always says that, he would spend all of his time making about 3 decisions a year because those are the big one-way door decisions, right?
Right. Well, I do know, and using kind of a military background, there's a lot of quotes about planning, and it's not about creating the plan because the plan falls apart soon as you put it into real life. But the value was in planning, looking at all the options, weighing the options. So when things hit you and it's different and you have to make a decision quickly, you already thought about different ways, possibilities, different options. So you can then, as we said before, lead with speed. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to that segue. Exactly this one. I think this whole mindset of decision making, right? And making a decision, and then what you should be doing is trying to find the information that's going to help you with the next decision, or affirm or give you more information about whether or not you made the right decision. So this is why I think speed is so important to almost everything we do. And I like to, one thing that I've learned in my experience is nothing good happens without urgency, right? So instilling a sense of urgency brings focus. It puts you in a position where you must really understand what you're doing, right? So I think the first step is urgency, and that'll lead to purpose, right? But you may have to instill urgency before you find your purpose.
So I love the concept of urgency. I have a client that I also coach, and the company has a lot of urgency going on. Their market is completely changing, and they have to do a lot of changes to figure things out. He went halfway around the world for a board meeting. Planes got delayed and hung over and all that, and he basically went off the plane, quick shower, and right into the meeting and got grilled for 2 hours. And he said, "That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is the loss of urgency. We have a raging fire that we're talking about at this level, but by the time it gets down through the levels, that urgency disappears." He kind of did an analogy of a long, long freight train. If you ever see one that's just starting, there's looseness in all the couplers between all the cars. So the engine starts moving, but it could be 20 minutes before the caboose actually moves.
And I think we experience this all the time in a tech culture. There's many projects I think we can all get into where, what the natural mentality is, people want to try to define a very loose time frame, right? And what they do is they build a lot of, I would say, extra space into that time frame, or just fluff, right? And as humans, I believe we will fill that space with work, whether or not it's valuable work or not work, right? So I think this sense of urgency is critically important to get anything important done. And it leads us to the ability to prioritize, right? Because I also believe that's another key, I would say, criteria for being a leader, right? Is really understanding everything is about prioritization. But it also, under urgency, requires us to prioritize what's the next set of steps that I need to do to bring me more information to understand if I'm heading in the right decision. And I think this is where projects go off the rails, right? If there is not a sense of urgency, you can see people take a long time. Like, I just today I was having a discussion with somebody in our organization, and they're like, what we do is we keep meeting, we keep meeting, we keep meeting. And, the normal thing is to escalate. And I'm like, well, if we had this iterative mindset, right, what we would do is set up a regular type of check-in or status meeting or daily stand-up where we would talk about what's going on, and we would see in some type of visual or some type of topic how things are getting blocked and they're always at the same status, right? So the iterative mindset is critical to driving the speed that we seek.
So you call them iteral mindset, but this is the short type loops that we said in the beginning. And this creates a different behavior because, as you said, it takes the fluff out of it. And oh, shoot, I'm going to be in a meeting in 2 days. I better have something to show, right? We have that mindset that comes out of that.
And again, I think one thing to add to that, and it leads to this mindset shift, this transparency, right? So once you set a mindset of urgency, right, you're prioritizing. You move out of this command and control, right? Because what you need to do on a very daily basis or a regular basis is you need to pull all the inputs, right? You no longer have the time to do a command and control. You no longer have a time to give my boss a status update, let his boss give that person a status update. Maybe they go talk to another stakeholder, they go get some information. Just the command and control communication cycle takes time. And if you instill this sense of urgency, you no longer have the time to do that command and control communication style. So you must move to a more transparent organization so that everybody that needs to be involved is involved all the time, and you break down that level of command and control, and you're a much more transparent organization.
Well, I think it adds a more of a transparency, and this is probably one of the hard pieces of that mindset shift is that you have to give empowerment or give spread that control down to people. And sometimes they have a hard time with it. They want to be told what to do rather than take on the ownership and maybe the blame if it doesn't go right.
I completely agree with you, but I would say from my perspective, I have a bigger challenge with the other side, right? If you're moving away from a command and control structure, there's a lot of behavioral tendencies built up that the person that has the information is the one in control because they are the only one that has it. And asking somebody that has built up that behavioral mindset to share information is very depowering to them, right? So again, being very empathetic with asking a leader to be more transparent, there's a sense of devaluation that happens when you ask them to be transparent. But again, I want to go back to speed. If you focus on the speed aspect of it, you are more willing to get that person to understand that they have a set of tasks that they need to do as part of this team. Right. So while they always, yes, had this information and they drew some level of power from it, by being transparent, it actually is freeing to them to do the most critical things. Maybe they need to do stakeholder management. Maybe they need to go take care of an escalation. They have more time to do the work that they need to do rather than this kind of, hoarding information type of thing. So that's where I see a lot of value come from.
I like this concept of or the topic, and not that I like we do it, but the hoarding of information is a critical problem that I see many, many times. So while you're trying to do this mindset shift, can you tell me about a time where it didn't land right away and what happened?
Every day. I think, again, I don't want to get too specific about it, but we could say that we have one of our, and again, I'm not going to say which one this is for all of the people that are, but I had a very strong, high performing manager, right? And, one of the situations, and I wouldn't say that they hoarded information, but they had a very keen understanding of who needed to know the information in order to optimize the work getting done. And, again, this very topic that we had to go to, discussions about, hey, we want to be more transparent. We want everybody to have information, and that person, came back and said, hey, it's going to take more time away. I'm going to have to educate more people as soon as I start opening up the floodgates of information. And I said, no, people will actually, get on board with this and we'll go forward. Well, in this case, I would say the manager was actually right, right? So a side effect of being more transparent is sometimes it takes more time away from leaders to actually answer the questions around why, right? Really provide the backbone of this, right? And we saw the impact on this one project. It actually did slow down. Now there was other side effects that were happening as well, but this one leader, what was impacted by this. I will say fast forward to 6 months, and I will also say I didn't have the best relationship with this leader, but 6 months later, that leader came back to me and said, you know what, Chris, you were right. And I'm like, okay, this is great. What happened? Well, the organization grew to a point where the value of knowledge that they all had became a strength. So little by little, that organization grew more efficient, more efficient. They better understood what they were doing, and you could see the velocity and the capacity of those teams pick up over time. Right. So again, I think the message here is, sometimes by opening up transparency, you may have to put more work into it, but you will see that efficiency curve come up over time, right? So it may not be a quick payback.
So what I'm hearing, the takeaway is when you try something, it may not work exactly the first time. Persistence is a big key to it, and it'll pay back tenfold. That's my number down the road. But sometimes we don't know how long that's going to take. So tell me now, if we have this short loops, we're building this transparency and sharing of trust in a mindset. Tell me about that connective tissue that really connects us now, this operating model, all the way to the stakeholder and back.
Yeah. So, and again, I think that the last story I told is very important with this one, because as soon as you open up transparency, I would say it's like a drug. People crave it, they want more of it, they want to understand it. And the mindset here, I think we can all agree on, or anybody could challenge me on this, is from a technical perspective, the more that your developers or anybody working on your products or your technical things know about what they're trying to solve, the better the solution will be. So as you open up transparency, people are really, they need to be fed what information is happening, right? So you need to build I would say, an information flow within your culture, right? You must build instrumental things in which at a top line, you are sharing what are the goals, what is the purpose, what are the intermediate goals that we're hitting? Like, are we hitting them? Are we behind? So you must build this information flow, and it should really be around what are the objectives of the organization, what are the goals, and then regular status updates that flow through the organization. And then what you need to do is build feedback loops. So once you push all that information through the organization, there needs to be that feedback loop about how well the organization is actually consuming that information, as well as feedback, because the people on the front line building the products, building your technical solution, will have direct feedback on some of the plans that are being planned at a higher level. The more that you can sense, the more that you can understand that feedback and incorporate the feedback, I think the better off your organization will be and the healthier your organization will be.
So you're talking about this connective tissue, this communication isn't just me to the next level and then to the next level like the couplers on the train, because what we get in those couplers on the train is the old telephone game, right? What you send on one side, you don't know exactly what's going to come out on the other side. So you're opening up all kinds of channels.
Yes. Yes, I think the what I've seen most successful is you have standard information that gets sent through many different channels. And again, it's critical, like you said, that it is standard information. It's not one piece of information that's interpreted and then sent out. It is standard information that's sent out to everybody through multiple channels that multiple people can consume, because you do not want the interpretation in there. Now, while I say that, I'm not a huge authoritarian in this area, because one of the powers of a high performing organization is your leadership structure. So you should be able to distribute information from them, and then they know how best to take that information and distribute it to their teams, because they know their teams very well. They know how they consume information. So I think a mixed approach is going to be there. But again, I really stress everybody that you must put in the commitment to make sure that you are feeding the communication beast, because once you start this, your teams will always want it. I once could tell a story that we started 2 week all hands. All right. And everybody complained, wow, you're going to make me come to this meeting every 2 weeks. And I had a colleague that put it pretty well. He answered the question as, hey, just think of it as the dentist, right? You know, you have to go, you don't really like it. But once you're there, it's over and you can go across your business. But we did these 2 week all hands for maybe a couple months. And we said, okay, we're going to slow them down to once a month. And everybody said, no way, we're getting too much information. We love what's being distributed to us. So they demanded the 2 week cadence, right? Where we started, where nobody wanted it. And then everybody demanded that we keep going with it. So once you start this, it happens.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate a bit. Is that just we just don't like change? So we didn't like the first change because it was going to be too much, and then you got us used to it, so I don't want to do change again.
This one I can answer because I did do like some focus studies with some people. And really, the feedback that I got was everybody was interested in strategy, right? So one of your communications should always be about how do you relate to strategy. The second one is recognition, especially in technical roles. People need recognition, right? Because, we're going through these cycles of, getting a product out the door. Everybody's working hard. You drop in and then you do this constantly. You must have recognition of when people, go above and beyond. So, strategy, recognition, and then really everybody is interested to see how their work is being used. So, any customer reference studies, any use case studies, those three things are what everybody said they wanted, and they wanted it on a constant basis. So I don't think it was about the lack of change. I really think, and this is what I've learned, those three aspects of communication are critically important.
So this is your transparency at Cadence that we talked about, that you're getting it out there every 2 weeks. You're getting feedback from your customers every 2 weeks and feeding that to the whole organization.
Yes, firmly believe that everything must be around that cadence, right? So, we've decided on a 3 week cadence. And again, this was a previous company. Right now, 3 week cadence. So, yes, we do 3 weeks of work, we do 3 weeks of work, we release after that, we do feedback studies with our customers, we get that information out and we distribute that through the organization on 3 week cadence. So, the whole machine is really around this 3 week cadence, right? And it is the thing that I would say systemizes that speed, right? Because everybody gets programmed to say, okay, every 3 weeks, this is what's happening. And you get people into, I love to reference the flywheel. I think it was Jeffrey Moore, right? And is good to great, right? The more that you could get that flywheel spinning in the momentum, the more that flywheel will just pick up speed and really run itself, right? So this is really the flywheel concept in action.
So I was going to ask a question. We said cadence a lot. We talked about rhythm and what's the importance of it, but I think you just answered that.
Yeah, and it is, and I think one of the things we didn't touch on is the importance of the stakeholders in all this, right? I think one thing that I've learned over my career, and this is why, again, this cadence is so useful, is the best way to make your stakeholders happy is constant, frequent updates. So if they can almost program into their schedules that they are going to get an update every 3 weeks, right? You almost prevent the negative effect of them always asking or them saying that they're not well prepared, right? Because in my line of work, our stakeholders are the ones that are going out there and talking to customers and gathering feedback. And the more that you can prepare them on a constant cycle of what are you working on? What's been the feedback that you're taking into account? What are the benefits? What are the KPIs? As they go to customers, they have a refreshed set of information. So again, one thing to say here is what like if you're a tech person and you want to make a sales guys happy, give sales guys new stuff. And it doesn't even matter if it's important to that specific customer. They use the new stuff to get a meeting with the customer just to find out what's happening with the customer, right? So the more that we can feed our stakeholders, the more that they can go and get more information on behalf of us.
So we told our listeners that you're going to share your playbook to champion Agile without losing efficiency. What's that about?
So, a lot of people come to me and they say, "Oh, this agile stuff, it doesn't work, right? Too many meetings, too many of this." And I think this is really the playbook here is you really have to have a rigid framework around that cadence, right? And what do I mean by that is you want to minimize the amount of meetings or work that's taking your team away from getting things done. So by agreeing on this cadence and really standardizing the ceremonies that happen and reducing those number of ceremonies, you can really retain this efficiency while moving towards agile. I think the other point that we've talked about, Jim, in the past is you need to change your mindset to a mindset of experimentation, right? So every 3 weeks, you're attempting to get something done, and then the next iteration, you're verifying that, right? So you're always moving forward with confidence because you've had a theory and then you're testing that theory and then you're reassessing that theory by the new information you have. So I think that is what is driving the efficiency is you're always moving forward with confidence because you're always getting something better or you're always learning and you're always moving the ball forward.
I love that. If anybody knows me, I love the word experiment. We talk about let's try this and see what happens. Let's run a pilot. And if I ask a few months later what happened, they'll tell me, I don't know. We did 6 things at the same time. I don't know what helped what or whatever. But the word experiment brings that whole scientific piece to it. I have a hypothesis. I think if I do this, I'm going to get that.
Yeah, it goes back to a conversation we had, and I'll say it for the audience, right? Which is, in today's tech world, right? Technology is changing so quickly that a lot of people have great ideas, but I don't think anybody knows for certain if that idea is the right idea or the idea that's going to take off. So in today's world of digital transformation or even artificial intelligence, whatever the buzzword of the day is, we need to adopt this iterative mind of trying to remove ambiguity and do that experimentation because nobody has it right. I think the person that can move the quickest is the one that will be able to experiment the fastest and will be able to learn the more and be able to really find what is the right direction that they need to go. So in today's world, I think it's all about speed and experimentation and learning quickly.
I 100% agree. Now, that's all great. Let me take you back a little bit. Let's get to know you. Take us back. Where did you grow up and what was life like there?
So interesting. I grew up on the beach of South Jersey in Ocean City, New Jersey. And I would say really had a very good, honest childhood, just going to the beach and enjoying sports.
Was there someone early in your life, maybe out on that beach, a teacher, a mentor, a family member, maybe, who helped shape how you think about leadership today?
Interesting. Yes, there is one teacher I'm going to struggle to remember his name, but he was my Latin teacher in high school, and I can bring it back to one of the strongest pieces of advice I've ever gotten in my life. And he said, "Every person you meet will know something more than you. Your job is to try to find out what that is and learn that thing that they know that you don't know." And I think this really instilled a sense of curiosity in me, right? So it doesn't matter what we're talking about. And maybe it's also because I'm an extrovert, but I really love to talk to people about anything and really understand what they know that I don't know. But it was this individual that really instilled that sense of curiosity in me.
So, what do you know that I don't know?
I don't know. We got to have a conversation. We tend to have very good conversations.
If you think about your journey, what's one experience that might surprise people about how you shaped it?
I could tell you this. This is probably there's a sense of, I would say, what you could either say luck or being in the right position at the right time, right? So my first job out of college, right? I put my resume together, and the reality of my resume is I started my career in chemical engineering. I did 2.5 years in chemical engineering, and then I found myself just much more interested in computer science. So I switched out of chemical engineering into computer science. I actually, graduated with 2 degrees in mathematics and in physics. So I didn't get chemical engineering or computer science. I got it in math and physics because that's the credits I was in. I put that on my resume and I sent it off. And in my first interview with my first company, Merck, the gentleman read my interview or my resume, and he goes, "So you have a degree in chemical engineering and computer science?" And I go, "No, that those were the majors I took, but I actually got a degree in math and physics." And he goes, "Well, you did good on the interview, so we're going to hire you." Right? But, you know, I don't know. I don't consider this. I don't know if I was lucky or there was right time, but sometimes I think you just got to have a positive attitude and realize your time will come.
Yep, that's very true. So, when you're not leading teams, driving change, what recharges you?
The thing that I like to do is grab a good book, right? So, one of the things that and this I've done this more as I've grown older is really a good leadership book or a good I would just say biography, anything like that. Just love to read and kind of think. I would say is really recharging to me.
Well, I'm glad you set it up for me because my book is coming out next week and it's called Lead Like a CEO.
And I already have a pre-copy, and I'm a couple chapters through it, and really learning a lot.
Oh, great. Great. I love to chat with you about it when you're done, see what you like. But leadership has so many facets to it. There are so many books out there. What's your favorite one so far?
I will have to say, to this day, I still love the Hit Refresh from Satya Nadella. I think that was one of the most impactful books that I've ever read. And I think, again, in our day and age, I think it's critically important. I try to tell people there's 3 things that I think will make us or anybody successful, right? One is empathy, right? You must have empathy. You must have the ability to connect to people. And I think that is empathy. You must distribute trust, right? So, the ultimate thing to get in a high performing organization and trust. And once you have empathy and trust, then you can do distributed decision making. You could really distribute decision making throughout the organization. So those are the 3 things. But Hit Refresh from Satya Nadella was impactful for me.
Wow, that's really great. So tell me, how can people reach you? You want to share your contact information?
Sure. I'm not a social media person, but I do spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Again, a lot of leadership posts and likes. So you can catch me on LinkedIn. I am Chris-M-Nelson on LinkedIn, and be glad to connect with anybody and really kick off a conversation on LinkedIn.
What would you like to be the last word you leave with our listeners?
Again, I would say really going back to what I summarized with hit refresh. I think leadership these days is really around those three I would say things, right? One is empathy, right? I also say empathy drives curiosity, right? So I would advise everybody to, really learn and I think you can learn empathy. I think it's empathy. I think the other one is lead with trust, right? I often try to tell people that assume positive intent, right? Trust people because the only way to get trust back is to first give trust. So, really focus on trust. And I think if you can get an organization and a team or whatever you're doing with empathy and trust, then I think you can do distributed decision making where everybody is empowered. And I think once you have that, and I think I've achieved that in several organizations, you can see how it's a high performing organization and one where everybody's engaged and happy.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm sure our listeners are going to love this conversation. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jim. Looking forward to the next time.
Well, come back another time. I would love it. And that's it for this episode of Building Legendary Leaders. See you next time.
Building Legendary Leaders podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.